Lawrence, in terms of Christie getting out tonight, I feel like he gave a good final speech as he was leaving. We know the terms in which he campaigned and the terms in which he debated. He was in all of the debates before tonight, but he wasn't making a difference in the numbers. He wasn't making a difference in the polling. He didn't pose a threat to anybody in any state. What do you think the impact will be of him leaving, given the fact that he really was taking on Trump in a different way that the other candidates weren't?
Well, every impact is marginal in the Republican campaign against the inevitable Trump nomination. But it's going to be, a marginal difference in November. And so what I was watching tonight, I've watched, Chris Christie's entire political career. I've never seen a Chris Christie speech that I liked. I'd never seen a Chris Christie speech that I respected, that had anything in it that I admired, until tonight.
Really?
When it was virtually the entirety of it that was good, and not just good, but exactly what Republican-leaning voters need to hear. Forget about Trump voters. They're gone. They are lost to a cult. They won't be back until there's no Trump on the ballot. He is speaking to voters who are not sure about Biden. They're independent. They normally vote Republican, but they really don't want to vote for Trump. He can hold on to them. He is not voting for Donald Trump in November. He may never say that he's voting for Joe Biden, and he might not vote for Joe Biden in New Jersey. He might just write in somebody else. That's fine. That will be very, very helpful, because every Republican who doesn't vote for Donald Trump holds Donald Trump down from victory. And he has a way of speaking to Republicans that no Democrat can do, that Joe Biden will never be able to do, that Barack Obama won't be able to do. There won't be any surrogate on the Democratic side who can speak to the Republicans the way Chris Christie did tonight, and he used the most forceful language that I've ever heard in this space. It's even more forceful and effective than what Joe Biden has been saying in his first two speeches.
And it hasn't been enough to get Republicans to vote for him in large numbers, but it could, you're saying, change the dynamics of how Republicans vote.
He depresses anyone who's holding that Trump ballot in their hand. He really depresses them. He brings up people like George Washington. How dare you? How dare you bring up George Washington and the figures they're supposed to admire when I'm trying to vote for this horrible person, who believes that he is allowed to assassinate as many people, not just a man, but as many senators as it takes to make sure he's not convicted in the Senate on impeachment. He's allowed to kill that many senators. That's what his lawyer said in court. And that's what Christie brought up in a way that only he can.
And by the way, I agree with you. Chris Christie, there was a little bit of self-reflection in the way that he spoke too. And we talked about this earlier, Jen, that you could see there's a little guilt, because he said, I've known this guy longer than anybody else. I know him. And I supported him, and I thought I could make him a better president. But he said, and I thought this was an important line, if you think for 1 second that Donald Trump is going to do anything for you rather than for himself, that he cares about you, and he speaks in such a plain-spoken, regular guy way that really Joe Biden kind of does, but not like that. And he sounds like a regular Republican. And he is standing in for people like Liz Cheney, who they see as an elite, for people like Adam Kinzinger, who they've thrown away. It's harder to throw him away. He is the regular guy that closed the bridge.
There's one thing he said in there that was so important to me personally, because he knows Donald Trump. He knew Donald Trump. He knew what Donald Trump was going to be as president, and he still supported him to be president. So I retain a certain strong feeling about that I don't let go of easily. But he did something. He said at least one line about why he did that, and it was confessional. And he said it was because of ambition. And if he didn't have that line in there, my respect for this I'd cut it significantly, but it would still be extremely effective communication to Republicans. But he actually communicated to me what that first decision was about when he knew he was supporting someone who was then unfit to be president.